everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Real Estate and Visas, Everything You Need to Know. Let's wait just a few seconds to give time to people to enter. We have here our guests already, Sandra and Andres. How do you feel today, Sandra?
I'm feeling well. I'm excited. I've been running after this man to do a webinar with us for months. Finally, I could get him. So I'm really happy.
Good. And you, Andres?
I'm feeling great. I'm so happy to finally be here. Thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to speak about this very important time with the Golden Visa and to help people make their dreams come true.
That's good. Okay. Let's wait just a little bit more. Sandra, you can...
I can make a little disclaimer. We have been doing several webinars by now. We know that it's very hard to cover all the questions of the people that reached out to us. But one thing I can promise, please contact us. We will answer you. We will give you your answers, and we'll be, most cases, also available for a Zoom to discuss and to clarify whatever questions you have about investment or about moving to Portugal. So we will be at your disposal if there are additional questions that won't be covered in this webinar.
Okay, so I think we are ready to start, right? Okay, so hello everyone. Again, let's start our webinar. Real Estate and Visas, Everything You Need to Know. We have our guests Sandra Gomes Pinto and Andres Jennings with us. It's a pleasure to be with you all here today. Good morning to the American continent. Good afternoon to Europe at this time, and good evening to those who may be watching us from Asia, Australia, and that part of the globe. So, regarding our guests here today, we have Andres Jennings, who is the best realtor operating in Portugal, a person with unique sensitivity and competence, and has been sharing all his savvy to help dozens of clients to make the best investments here in our country. And we also have Sandra Gomes Pinto, a great lawyer with 30 years of experience in real estate, immigration, construction, arbitration, and litigation. And she also has an extensive team specialized in relocation processes. That team that I'm very proud of being part of, as we have hundreds of clients super satisfied with our services. We provide A to Z solutions, and we always correspond to the most various needs and expectations from all the people that seek our law office. So it's a real pleasure to be here today for myself and with you both. And I think it would be interesting for people to get to know you better. So Andres, I invite you to talk a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much, Maria. I'm Andres Jennings. I'm currently living in Porto, Portugal, but I was born and raised in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the United States, in the Southwest of the United States. At a very young age, at the age of 17, I left the United States to live in Canada to study at an international school called the United World College with about 200 kids from 100 different countries. I was one of 6 Americans at that school, and my eyes were opened up to the rest of the world very quickly at a young age, and I realized how big the world was and how much was out there to see and do. And I made a promise to the philanthropist who granted my scholarship that I would try to learn 5 languages before I turned 30. So I took on that challenge and lived in a bunch of other countries in Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, Brazil, the Czech Republic, Spain, and now here in Portugal. And I've been working in a lot of different industries. I worked in English education. I worked teaching aviation English in the Czech Republic. I opened an English school in Brazil. Then I worked in tourism for many years between Prague, Barcelona, Madrid, and also here in Porto, Portugal. And I entered the real estate industry in 2019, where I was invited by this company, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Portugal Property, to sell real estate to international investors, which is our #1 focus point and service point. And it's been a very, very wonderful experience.
Great. Nice to hear about you. Sandra, and you, what can you tell us about yourself?
I have a very less interesting life than Andres. I have been working nonstop for 30 years as a lawyer here in Portugal. From day one in big litigation cases and with international clients that were doing foreign investment in Portugal. I took part of important projects such as the enlargement of the bridge 25 de Abril was one of the big projects I had the chance before 30 to be part of and to play an important role. I also was responsible for the legal part of the renovation of the German school, which was a project partially funded by the German government. I was a partner of a big firm for 17 years. I lecture in Heidelberg, which is one of the top universities in the world. I had an intense activity in litigation and arbitration and do a little bit presentations all over the world in regard to arbitration, litigation, investment in Portugal, tax benefits, and so on and so forth. In the last 7 years, I create my own firm, very focused on people. I think what differentiates us, we do like people, we do like what we do, so we try to be as responsive as possible, and we try to understand the details of the relocation process and how it can be difficult for foreigners moving to Portugal. And also from the legal point of view, we try to understand all the details in terms of the concrete conventions to avoid double taxations, everything that can create problems and can simplify or benefit our clients. So at this time, we have a team of our own who have the same values as me, that do like people, do like be of service, and try to be as responsive and to help clients as much as we can. So I think this is me.
Thank you. Okay, so starting about the subjects that brought us here today. Of course, we have had a lot of questions from people in general and especially from our attendees. Maybe we should start talking about the golden visa and if there are any updates, any special information available. Sandra, would you like to explain us a bit about this?
So there's not much to explain. So after many contradictory announcements from our government, the last announcement was that the golden visa would end, but until a new law enters into force, the new applications for the golden visa will still be accepted. So this is the status of the situation. So I think for those who really would like a golden visa investment, they should have started yesterday, but I think this will be the last chance. Yesterday we had some announcements of our president, and we do know that there are lots of persons and well-known persons from all types of our community that have been against the change of this law, of the changing to when this golden visa regime. So I believe that the president might raise some questions in terms of legality or constitutionality of a new law that will change the golden visa process. But at this point, we don't know. What we know is if people apply today, the government announced and clarified that an application is still acceptable. So for those who would like to do a golden visa investment, it's now or never. I think this would be their last chance.
Anyway, Andres, are there still good viable options for the golden visa at the moment?
Absolutely. Yeah, there are a myriad of options out there around the country, from the mainland and islands included. Let's not forget the Azores and Madeira as well. Throughout the country, there have been a number of changes in availability and qualifying types of properties, especially the biggest change that took place at the end of 2001, where residential properties no longer qualified for golden visas in high density population areas, namely Porto, Lisbon, Braga, the three great big cities of Portugal, and almost the entire coastline. I'll share a little bit more on that later, but there are lots of options still. There's still investments in privately owned freehold real estate, investments in shared real estate like hotels. There are equity funds, there are education funds. There are lots of options out there nationally. So people should definitely feel comfortable that they have plenty of options.
Okay. Fortunately, we don't have only the golden visa, which requires investment. We have other visas, like the D7, for example. And Sandra, would you like to talk about it, please?
So I think the D7 is a great option. We have been advising clients to go for the D7 route many months before this announcement of the government, because the D7 doesn't require an investment. It's also, the process is simpler and more straightforward, and it's quicker than the golden visa. So the only financial requirement for a D7 is a passive income of a minimum of a Portuguese minimum salary or wage, which is 760 euros per month. So this is not a big requirement. There is also a requirement in terms of proof of accommodation. Many consulates and embassies do demand that the people has a 1-year lease prior to initiating the process, and people have to show their criminal records. So Portuguese state wants to make sure that you're not a criminal. So that being said, these requirements are relatively low. I think in the future, we are expected, the Portuguese government, to make it more complicated, because also we have a pressure from the European Union that Portugal is not just an open door to the world. So I believe this will be more complicated in the future because the requirements are relatively low. The great advantage of the golden visa, though, was for those who could not live in Portugal, because all the other visas other than golden visa are residential visas. So you do have to have your life based in Portugal. So, and there are people who are not, for professional reasons or for family reasons, they cannot move to our country. And in that case, the golden visa option was good, because the only requirement in terms of stay in Portugal was 14 days within a period of 2 years, which is very little. But it's important to state that all the advantage that the golden visa had, the D7 also has. So with the D7, as with the golden visa, you can reside in Portugal. You can travel freely within the Schengen space, plus Iceland, plus Switzerland. You can, if you reside 5 years in Portugal, if you have basic knowledge of Portuguese and meet other criteria, there's a simple path to Portuguese citizenship and to acquire one of the best passports in the world. And on the second stage, you can choose the European country to live once you acquire Portuguese citizenship, because there's free of movement within the European Union. You could also benefit from the Portuguese healthcare, for the Portuguese public school system, also with the D7 and with the golden visa. So in terms of many benefits of the golden visa, you can have them also with the D7. I think that the major advantage of the golden visa is the amount of time that you have to reside in Portugal, because the D7, as all the other visas except for the golden visa, require you to live in Portugal and to have your life centered in Portugal. With the golden visa, you could live in Portugal if you want, but the only obligation in terms of stay was 14 days within a period of 2 years.
Okay. And within these last few years, it appeared a new visa, the digital nomad visa. Would you like to explain better what this visa is about?
So initially with the pandemic, there were a lot of remote workers coming to Portugal that they are called the digital nomads. And they used to come through the D7 route, because although the D7 was initially created for passive income, the Portuguese authorities admitted that people that were remote workers coming to Portugal could use the D7 route. In the end of 2022, the Portuguese government launched a new regime, the digital nomad visa, for those who have active income. So to differentiate the D7 and the digital nomad visa, the D7 is for those who have passive income, such as rentals, interests, royalties, pensions. The digital nomad visa would be applicable for all those that have active income, but by being paid from abroad and have a professional relationship with a foreign entity, irrespective of its form. It can be a labor contract, an independent contract, so whatever professional relationship they have with a foreign entity. So this is the digital nomad visa. So just to repeat, the requirements are: you have to show a professional relationship with a foreign entity, you are being paid from abroad, and you have to show that on average you earn something like 4 Portuguese wages or salaries, which is at this point 3,040 euros. I think these are the basics of the two visas.
Okay, and regarding all these types of visas, it's very frequently asked about the timings. And although we cannot commit with timings here in Portugal for whatever it happens in our country, what would people expect from Golden Visa D7 in terms of timings?
I think the Golden Visa was taking too long. Before the pandemic time, it was taking more or less 1 year. After the pandemic time, 1 year and a half, and we cannot say for sure. In respect to the D7, and this is why we were advising clients to go to this route for those who could. I would say that if you have every paper in order, you can count with 6 months before you have the CEF appointment. But even though you start a D7 process in the country of nationality or legal residency. So, and in the Portuguese embassy or consulates, or in some cases in the VSF agency. So it would depend on the embassy and the agency. We know, for example, in Canada, we had this experience that they only accept appointments in the first day of the month in one of the consulates. So there are different consulates, different embassies, and that ask for different documents, that interpreted the requirements of the law in a different way. So we are always communicating with the embassies and the consulates and trying to understand what's the concrete practice in the consulate and the embassies. And also the process has been evolving. So in the beginning of the D7, if you had someone saying you can stay at my home, that would be accepted as a proof of accommodation. Now they do demand on average normally a 1-year lease, and in some cases they even said that was not sufficient. We already had clients that told us that someone told that was not sufficient. So the requirements from a practical point of view are being changed. Also, in terms of financial requirement, we may expect different changes, because the law only says that you have, in respect to the D7, that you have to prove that you have financial means, and the entities have been interpreted that is to have financial means is to show on average that you have a Portuguese minimum wage for the D7 plus 50% for a spouse, plus 30% for each child. But this might change, because this is not something that is written in the law. This is how the authorities have been interpreted the requirement financial means for the D7.
Okay. Okay, once we have this kind of uncertainty in terms of timings, maybe there are other things that we can try to control. And now to Andres, I would like to ask, how should an American or other nationality prepare to invest in real estate in our country?
That's a solid question. And if I can quickly, just for Golden Visa purposes or for any purpose, there's
for the purposes you find pertinent.
Well, since we're talking about the Golden Visa, I prepared a quick little slideshow, if I may share my screen.
Of course, go ahead.
To show what I think are some of the key steps that somebody would need to do in order to get a golden visa within the timeline that we have. So golden visa has been around since 2012, and it's been an excellent development option for Portugal, with over 6 billion euros, I believe, that have come in over the years to create options. But the things you really got to focus on will be, number one, learn about the country and the buying process, which you're doing right now. Congratulations, you've taken step one by being on this webinar, and I'm sure everybody around the world that is participating is eager to get as much done information-wise as possible. Believe in yourself. Optimism is an amazing tool, and so is a little bit of courage if you have some of that to move forward. We live in a time of information parity. Information asymmetry is almost dead, and you can empower yourself with as much free information out there as possible before you initiate spending money, which you will eventually if you want to do this. You learn about the countries and the areas that are available for all real estate, but with golden visa, the types of real estate that would qualify for you. And you can trust the information that you receive, but make sure you verify that with a competent entity. Somebody working in real estate and an attorney is very, very important. And create a timeline for completion that you want to get this done. Having worked with golden visa for years, I've seen people call me up and a year goes by and then nothing gets done. And if you really want to get this done, you got to sit down and say, okay, if they're saying I got until the end of June, July, then I want to get this done then. Because if you don't set a timeline, it's going to be really hard for you to follow through. And know what you can get. This is kind of key. In 2022, on January 1st, residential properties no longer qualified if they were found in high density areas. High density areas were considered everything you see in the red or the coastline, which should be clarified that these are not necessarily high density areas, but they're areas that the coast was removed for residential golden visa. This changed to commercial real estate only, and commercial real estate would vary from a school, a student housing building, a hotel, things that are commercially registered for use, not for habitation use, with the licensing granted by the cities. And there's a very varying number of costs that you can afford for the golden visa. There's low density and high density prices. With low density, the most affordable golden visa you can buy is a 280,000 euro golden visa of rehabilitation for residential or commercial real estate in low density areas. Yes, you can still buy a freehold residential home at as low as that price, but the rehabilitation visas require a twofold step of making a building that needs improvements already contracted with qualified competent contractor with a plan to improve the building. Otherwise, you can still buy any property or properties in low density areas, investing a total amount of at least 400,000 euros. And there doesn't need to be any rehabilitation or anything involved in that. In high density areas like Lisbon, like Porto, the two big cities, you need to have rehabilitation property that is commercially registered if you want it to qualify for golden visa. If you want to buy any property or properties in high density areas for golden visa, it's still possible, but they must be commercially registered properties. That is a significant change. There are also lots of other things you can do out there. You can invest in funds. You can invest like private equity funds, venture capital funds, those still qualify as well. Student funds as well, like schools and things like that. So these are things that you have at your disposal still. The next step is to have your ducks in a row and have as much ready as possible. Depending on your nationality, you're going to have to deal with, as Sandra said, the local bureaucracy for getting a KYC process, know your customer for the Portuguese government. One big scrutiny issue for the golden visa is that there's no fluid process for it in the European Union, which has caused problems by other countries. And Portugal has been exemplary since inception with doing very scrutinous background checks on people applying for the residency of a golden visa. So getting an FBI background check, working with Americans, I've seen very different reactions from different state governments through their federal bureaus. is just in California. In Southern California, it seems to be pretty easy to get a background check, where in Northern California it can be difficult. Wisconsin, surprisingly, is one of the most difficult ones that I've come across. And Florida can be pretty quick, but just as an example, you want to get this done, and you want to get it done as soon as possible. Normally, these background checks are valid for 3 months. So to get it done as soon as possible and have it ready for submitting your golden visa application is key. Then narrow down your options to how you want to invest, the price point you want to invest, and the type of investment that you want to make. And, it's number 4, but it's kind of a number 1. You got to have a great attorney throughout this entire process. Working with Sandra, it's been an absolute pleasure. And the reason this is important, because this is a long game relationship. Your attorney who helps you with your golden visa will be there for over 5 years to help renew your residency, to make sure that compliance is being completed. And a number of steps will happen in between and around, who knows what comes along that you might need. Maybe preparing your will, maybe preparing your asset distribution, taxation, all that kind of stuff. As Americans, we do have to still file taxes from a distance. You need to get a FACTA for your bank accounts that you open. But everybody needs to get a Portuguese tax number, and attorneys can help with that remotely. And also with the bank account, which you'll need. A very key step for the golden visa is that the payment is done from a bank account in your name here in Portugal, and that the funds come from a bank account anywhere in the world in your name to Portugal on a direct transaction. So this is a key step. And then, the next step is make that investment, pull the plug, go for it. And it's very important that you feel comfortable that with the decision, that you feel informed, and that you're in control every step of the way. So working with trusted people here on this side of the world in Portugal is a very important part of it. And, enjoy, celebrate, celebrate your successes, and make your dreams come true.
Okay. And while you make your dreams come true, it's better to know what to do. So let's ask Sandra, how is the property purchase process here in Portugal? In general guidelines, what do you have to say about it? Thank you so much, Andres, for that presentation.
First, you have to get the right property, and for that, it's fantastic to have an excellent realtor such as Andres. So I think that would be step number 1. Then from a legal point of view, sometimes now we see it in new properties. It's common to have a reservation where you pay something like 5,000 to 10,000 euros just to put the property out of the market. Sometimes this amount is reimbursed, sometimes it's not. It depends on what is written and what you contracted with the seller. After this reservation, in this reservation period, you'll have time to do a due diligence in respect to the property, to check the land registry, to check who were the owners, if there is litigation in respect to the property, if everything was legal before the city council in respect to the construction. It's important to say that we have a land registry that in Portugal, that with a code, you can access to all the information that will be enforceable to you in respect to this property. So in the States, it's common to have something called a title insurance, which here would not be needed, because with the code of the land registry, you can know exactly you can have the ID of the property. If there are encumbrances, if there are charges, if there are mortgages, if there is important litigation in respect to this property, all this information is in an online land registry you can access throughout the world just with a code. So it's extremely safe to buy a property in Portugal because of this. And it's safer if you have someone to take a look and do a due diligence. For instance, very often we have clients that come to us that are going to buy something that is not yet built. And at that time, it's important to check the financial situation of the seller, because as we know, whenever there is a crisis, the construction sector is the first to suffer. So it's important to check if there is any risk of bankruptcy of the person who is preparing this, who is selling this property that is not yet built. It's important to check the details of the property and to make sure that the project and the equipment of the property and all the details of the construction are part of the promissory contract. We know that there were some developers that sold things internationally and didn't allow the clients to take a look at the property itself. People could take a look at this online. So it's important to check the details and to make sure everything is in order. It's not, if everything goes well, you might say, I would not need a lawyer, but lawyers are here to prevent damages and to prevent pathological situations. And with 30 years experience, I already saw problems with promissory contracts that caused 20 years litigation. So it's important to prevent any problems because this is a serious investment for most middle-class persons. This is the most important investment they ever made. So it's better to take a look at the promissory contract and to make sure everything is correct, and to have someone independent to take a look and to meet the dots and to check that everything is in order. So first step, find a realtor. Second step, if you might make a reservation to put the property out of the market. You have someone doing a legal due diligence. Third step, you would do a promissory contract. It's not mandatory in Portugal, but everybody does it. Is a really binding contract where you have all the details of the deed, the details of the seller, the details of the buyer, the details of the property, the details of the business itself, the terms of payment, the date of completion, what happens if someone does not comply with the contract. And sometimes we have been experiences over and over with foreign clients whenever they want mortgages. There has been delays because the compliance systems of the banks are more and more complicated. So very often there are problems, and we have established in the contract there is the possibility of a prorogation if there are any problems or any delays in respect of the mortgage. And this has been a life-saving for our clients many times. So these small details can make a major difference, and can make in some cases that you don't lose the money of down payment. So it is really important to check the details of a promissory contract, that although it's not super complicated, if you don't check it and you don't have it analyzed correctly, there might be problems. Then on a fourth stage, there is the deed. The deed normally is done by a notary, an independent person that will double check all the papers and make sure everything is in order. So this is also why the process is something safe here in Portugal. And immediately after the deed in the notary, it's in the same path, it's done the registry before the land registry, and the registry before the tax authorities. This is something that is common. Very often, we also ask the clients to register the promissory contract because that prevents the seller from double selling it, or then this contract will be enforceable to all people, to all third parties that can enter into a contract with the seller. This is not a normal situation, but lawyers are here to prevent any damage and to make sure you won't lose your precious money that you invested in a down payment. So I would say this is basically the purchase process. I didn't talk about taxes. Our taxes are relatively low in comparison to other countries of Europe in the States. We have a stamp duty, a transfer tax. I will overdo it a little bit. I would say if you add 10% to the purchase price, you'll be on a safe side in terms of the taxes, the lawyer, the registry, and you can even do a home inspection if you feel more comfortable doing that. So basically, I think this would be the basic aspects of the purchase process. I would add that Portugal has a huge benefit because once you buy a property, the tax that you will be paying is very little. It's a city council tax that many times is based on the tax value of the property, and it's very low. In most of the cases, it's less than 1% per year. So it can be extremely beneficial for you to buy property in Portugal. For instance, I have an apartment that is worth now 500,000 euros because there was inflation in all the properties in Lisbon. But I pay annually an amount of less than 500 euros in 2 installments. So that being said, 500 euros for a 500,000 euro apartment, it's very low in comparison to the States, in comparison to the majority of countries in Europe. That being said, I think buying a property and doing real estate investment in Portugal can have the benefits of a golden visa, can have the benefits of an NHR regime, can have benefits of a country that doesn't have inherent taxes, and can have the huge benefit because I was recently in a convention with tax lawyers, and there were French tax lawyers saying that people could not afford to pay the real estate taxes. They could not afford to pay the middle class people. They could not afford to pay the inheritance tax in respect to properties. And so in this regard, Portugal is an exception. And from a tax point of view, in respect to real estate, it's a very, very attractive country. Do you agree with me, Andres?
I mean, absolutely. I'm invested here as well, and you know, understanding how things work in other parts of the world. Personally from the United States, but other European countries. You know, Portugal's a solid location for long-term investment. The equity increase of real estate in Portugal since 2012 has been 10% year over year. Even during the pandemic in 2020, we saw, well, everyone expecting a decline. We still went up 6.9%. So, you know, the long game is real estate is a solid game over here. And yeah, with you did a great job covering, you know, the purchase process, the closing costs. You know, the property taxes are on average 0.04% throughout the country. So that's a nice incentive for people to invest here. But you know, the long-term investment vision of Portugal is, in my opinion, just beginning. There are more cranes than a bird sanctuary out here in Porto and Lisbon. If you come and you see, you can play the count the crane game. You'll be out there for a while, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing that's happening here right now.
Okay, so as we started to speak about taxes, why not speak about something related to taxes that always concern our attendees and the public in general, which is related to the NHR regime. And I would like to ask Sandra to explain it better so that people can understand it.
First, I will explain a little bit of the NHR regime from a time perspective, because there are so many misconceptions about people that I think it's important to clarify. So the NHR, it's a beneficial regime for those who adopt Portugal as a tax residency. But the first thing, you have to become civil residency with a visa. It can be the golden visa, the D7, digital nomad. You have to have the right to live, study, or work in Portugal. So the first, you have to take care of the immigration part and to have a resident permit in Portugal. That would be the first step. Then you become tax resident in Portugal. And this is as a requirement for the NHR regime. And once you become tax resident, you have, and if you were not tax resident in the 5 months prior to initiating the application, because this is also a requirement, you can apply for the NHR regime until the next year after you became tax resident. For instance, if Andres became tax resident in Portugal now, he would have until 31st of March 2024 to apply for the NHR regime. The major benefit for the NHR regime are for retirees. So initially, Portugal said, normally the conventions to avoid double taxation say that in respect to pensions, people pay taxes where they reside. And Portugal initially said, we will exempt retirees that come to Portugal to pay taxes in respect to their pension for a 10-year period. Afterwards, also because of a pressure for the European Union, we tax 10% in respect of the pensions for those who move to Portugal and apply for the NHR. For the majorities of the nationalities, that means that people only will pay 10% in Portugal, which is much less. They can save thousands of euros in comparison to what they would pay in their country of nationality. For US residents, this is not so, the benefit is different because the states, in contrary to the majority of countries, they tax people based on their citizenship. So most Americans still will pay taxes in respect to their social security in the States. But in that case, Portugal, if they are already paying 10% or more in the States, they should not pay any money in Portugal, because Portugal says people will not pay 10%, they will only pay 10% in Portugal if they are not paying 10% of taxes in the country that is sourcing this pension. So that being said, in order to simplify the mechanisms of double taxation, this NHR regime can be very beneficial. It also has this advantage for retirees, and it has a major advantage for some professions that can be considered high quality profession, high value professions, such as tax, physicians, and can benefit the 20% flat tax rate for their income generated in Portugal, which is much less than an average Portuguese in those professions would pay. The NHR would also simplify and would have a major benefit in respect to passive income sourced in another country. For instance, if an American or a British has royalties, interests, rentals in their country of nationality, and they pay taxes there, they won't be double taxed in Portugal. So this is important to clarify. So the benefits of the NHR are only pay 10% in Portugal in respect of the pension, a 20% flat tax rate for some professions in respect to the income generated in Portugal, and a general exemption in respect to foreign passive income. It will be exempted here in Portugal. I think it's important to bear in mind 2 or 3 things in respect to the NHR that many people don't know. It's not automatic, so you have to apply. If you don't apply in time, you lose the opportunity to benefit from this tax benefit. You still have to present tax returns if you adopt Portugal as a residency and as a tax residency. So you will have to present a tax return in terms to your worldwide income, even if this income won't pay taxes in Portugal, and you will still need to pay taxes. It doesn't exempt you totally from paying taxes. You will still have to pay some taxes, but it will be for sure much lower than what you would pay in your country of nationality. Since we are talking about taxes, I would like to add some aspects which I think is important. We don't have wealth tax in Portugal, which is quite important in comparison to other European countries and the States. We don't have inheritance tax for direct heirs and spouses. So this could be beneficial for those who adopt Portugal as a residency and who want to acquire Portuguese citizenship, because this is not so in many other countries. What do you think about that, Andres? What do your clients feel about that? What can you tell us about this?
Well, taxes, no one likes taxes, but yeah, there are a number of benefits for making Portugal your global tax base if you do make the move with the non-habitual residency tax regime. There is one point that is important, that date she said of the 31st of March carries over without exception into the following year. So if you get your residency in January 2024, you have until March 31st, 2024 to apply for the non-habitual. You don't have until the following year, which and from experience, I've seen bad things happen with that. But fundamentally, yes, global taxation, Portugal is your base. There's a number of benefits for that as well. And I also think that depending on how you're handling your assets and your securities in other countries, it's important to research that if you do plan to make Portugal a retirement destination for you. When it comes to inheritance of assets, this is also very important. If you're married, it is automatic here in Portugal that assets are shared, and it is automatic that they go to your children. You do not have to worry about signing a will right away or anything like that. Portugal is very family oriented with how assets are shared, and that's an important point to make when people are making a real estate investment.
Yes, but I think that once you do a real estate investment, having a will here makes things easier from a bureaucratic point of view, because we have lots of benefits. Bureaucracy is still not one of them. So it would be important that if you buy a property, that you have your marriage certificate acknowledged here, and if possible to do a will ASAP. So if anything arises, you will be prepared and there will be no major complications.
Well, as you can imagine, we have loads of questions from our attendees, which if they are not addressed during this webinar, we would like to remind you that we will try to cover them all, and we will answer your questions, your emails, and you will get to know everything you need about regarding all your doubts or any subject that you need to know about Portugal. But maybe now we should go to another wave of subjects here. For example, people are asking a lot about the cost of living. I don't know, Andres, as you come from abroad, what is your perception about the cost of living here in Portugal?
Well, it's exceptional when you look at the value to volume that you get for the fundamental things like food and Portuguese wine. That's a whole other topic, but it really comes down to the way Portugal is, for centuries, very sustainable. This is a country that has been self-sustained in agriculture and self-producing for a very, very long time. And the Portuguese have a very traditional menu that has evolved with time, but really is full of staples that have not gone up in price. I was in shock when I moved here that I could have a 3-course meal for €5. That's it. With a smile on their face, and you know, that type of value is something that you just can't find easily in the world, let alone in Europe to this day. It's always been an attractive place for cuisine and gastronomy, but let's not forget that food is medicine, and Portuguese food is very pure, very good. And because a population of 11 million people with so much land and agricultural production, it is very affordable to live here just for food alone. But you know, the other things that matter too are always within reach, despite the inflation everybody's feeling right now. You know, the cost of living here is very low, but that's also because salaries are very low. That's a significant point to make, that the Portuguese minimum wage is unacceptably low, in my opinion, for the people, but that makes it very affordable for people who have a good income to have a very, very high quality of life without spending a lot of money.
I can add to that. I think €5 for a 3-course meal, perhaps in Porto. I think you the North still have some advantages in terms of pricing of food, because in Lisbon it will be a little more expensive. So, but I still have a great restaurants near us that do a €12 menu for a fantastic meal with wine. So I think that's it's still, in an European perspective, much more affordable. We have been American clients saying that they spend a little bit, one half of everything they would spend in the States in Portugal. Perhaps they are overdoing in some aspects, but the truth is we have Californians all over writing articles saying that they are sparing money, that it's almost a sin. And we have had clients that, in respect to healthcare, when they went to a private hospital, and in the end they could not believe, they spent there 3 hours, and in the end they could not believe the value they were paying. And they were telling me that in terms of insurance and healthcare, it will be around 1/10 of what they would pay in the States. I don't know if this is completely accurate, but I think in many cases, in complicated issues, Portugal, in terms of affordability of healthcare, has a major benefit. We even have a client, an American client, she has diabetes type 1. She used to spend €1,000 in the States in respect to insulin and her health condition. And in Portugal, once she became civil resident, we inserted her in the national healthcare system, and she doesn't pay a penny.
We have to see also that we have studied some statistics from healthcare, and we also know, in comparison to the United States, for example, the price of a cardiac surgery, that here in Portugal is like a regular one, around €25,000, and that the same surgery in the United States would cost over $100,000. Which I think it's quite a difference. And of course, even if you activate your health insurance, you would never have your amount coverage to be completely exhausted with this kind of interventions. So I believe that it's important here in Portugal, once you are living here, to be subscribed to the national health system, because it gives you a lot of support in many issues related to treatments or to medicines that are very hard to get. And through the national health system, you can even get them for free, as long as you bring along with you a medical report that sustains some kind of disability or disease that you may have. And I think it's a great asset that we have here in Portugal in what relates to healthcare in general.
Yes.
Okay.
I would add to that we even have some private healthcare insurance that do not exclude pre-existing conditions, do not have age limits. And we had some clients that initially they didn't want to drop their insurance in the US, because they said, if we drop our insurance, we cannot, with our age, we cannot get another one, even if we pay. But after some time of living in Portugal, they stopped paying for Medicare. And so I think this is an extremely very beneficial. If you take a look of some private hospitals in Portugal, such as CUF, Tejo, or some, we have fantastic equipment, very good doctors, and for a very affordable price. So I think that would be a major issue for Portugal. We had this client, you remember, Maria, that had this kidney problem, and we had to analyze that he had to take a complex immunosuppressant and the
True.
Portuguese very
Yes.
expensive, and the Portuguese state would pay for that. Maria,
Yes,
Maria worked
definitely.
during a long time in the private and public healthcare, so she knows a lot about this. She cares.
I think I do, yes. And I only have good things to talk about that. So yes, for sure. Okay. So we have been talking about healthcare, which interests to everyone, of course, but we have another important issue, which is the schools and universities, especially for the families that have kids or young people. And I believe that Portugal has something to say about it in the person of Sandra or Andres, if he has some perception about his kids as well. So maybe Sandra first, what do you
Yes.
have to say about this?
So I think we have a good public school. It's not perfect, but we still have a good public system. We also have a very interesting offer of growing offer of international schools. We have the sharing school, which is I visited recently with a project with learning based on projects. There is the United Nations School in Expo, which is also a very interesting project. And we have been seeing very interesting international school projects growing all over the country with new projects with an international environment, very focused on talents, and a different school, a more modern school, school based in the future. So we have this experience, and I think Europe in general we have a very good experience in school. Most of the Portuguese are very proficiency in English, and we learned English in the public schools and in the private schools. So we learned English in schools, and most of the Portuguese also speak several foreign languages. This is common in Portugal. We have a major advantage in terms of universities. We have universities that rank very well. For instance, I have a 19-year-old. He entered the engineer for computer science and electronic, and I paid something like 700 euros per year. And it's a university that ranks worldwide very well. So I think we don't
have loans for the students as well, right?
We don't have loans. And I urge people to take a look at Nova School in Carcavelos, which is this most modern university. Everything is in English. There is no money. Just students can surf. And I urge them to take a look at these new Portuguese universities, and that without student loans, I think it's very attractive, and it's universities that still rank very well. What your thoughts about this? I know you have young kids, Andres.
I have babies. I have babies. So we're looking at, preschools in Portugal. By law, all children must enter school at the age of 6. And, we're looking at, preschool and kindergartens right now. And in the long game, of course, education, like you said, there's plenty of options too. And the private school sector is growing by demand. There's more demand for that for international schools. But from my research, I've got to tip my hat to Portuguese private, semi-private, and even public schools. There is no reason these should not be considered when coming over here. Simply because they are in Portuguese. That's not something to discourage you from putting your kids through. The Portuguese have the highest English proficiency rate of any Latin-speaking country in Europe at 46% nationally. So these young kids are very exposed to English and other languages. And my wife is from the Netherlands, so my kids speak Dutch, speak English, and now they're speaking Portuguese. And the dream of becoming a polyglot for my kids is coming true faster than I thought. So absolutely, there are a number of options from expensive private schools. Yeah, they're here, but there's also some really good options, semi-private schools, private schools, and even public schools that I think really have value. Absolutely.
I would add, from a legal point of view, that once you become legal resident in Portugal with a golden visa, with a D7, with a digital nomad, your kids will be allowed to attend public schools for free. And so I think it's important to name that, and you will also be allowed to enter the national healthcare system. and to have the benefits of the national healthcare system. I think it's important from a legal perspective to add this.
Okay, so let's move to one of the last subjects before our Q&A, which regards to locations and weather. People are always curious about these. I believe that even foreign people are discovering Portugal even better than the Portuguese ones. So we have a huge demand for so many different places, and fortunately, we have those places here in Portugal. So, in your opinion, best locations, what about the weather? How is living here? Andres, would you like to start? What is your opinion?
Well, you guys know what I'm going to say. I mean, I love the North. I love it up over here. I was born and raised in the desert, the high mountain desert, New Mexico. And I love that kind of climate too. And you have that hot, deserty, dry, wonderful climate in the south of Portugal. If you go down to Algarve, the pristine landscapes of beaches and beautiful spaces that you have over there, and just amazing landscapes, and the dry desert kind of feel hot summers, very mild winters, probably the mildest in the country. And then you have this Tuscany kind of thing going on in Alentejo, if you're looking for like the plains and all that beautiful stuff. Moving up to north to Lisbon, the capital, action all the time, sunshine nonstop. It really is the case going south of the Silver Coast, where that's where you get a little bit more of a temperate climate. Nazaré, probably one of the most famous places in the world for surfing, if not the most famous, has an incredible coastline, but a milder climate. And you get that even more so coming up north, what we call the Green Coast over here. It's green because it rains. It rains up here, but it doesn't rain every single day like some people might give it reputation for. There is a rainy season that can flow usually from December until April. With the weather changing all the time, we haven't had the very long rain periods. We've had heavy rain for a short period, and then the sun comes out. Remember, folks, no rain, no rainbow. And we have a lot of sunshine up over here with a very mild summer comparable to the south. So for me, I do appreciate being close to the Atlantic and getting the nortada, this wind that comes in every day like clockwork at noon, that cools the city down and the coastline. You go inland to Portugal, then you get real temperature extremes. Going into the Douro Valley or inland towards the Spanish border, you're going to get maybe a 10-degree temperature difference. We're talking Celsius here, hot or cold throughout the year. So the Atlantic does make a big difference in why the climate is so nice over here.
And your perspective, Sandra, what is it?
Once
you are from the south.
This is, I think Portugal has this amazing, this is a small country, but with so many landscapes, with so many types of food, with so many differences, climate. So I think this is really attractive in Portugal. Within 3 hours, 4 hours, you've seen all Portugal, but you have so many different options. I like the north just to visit. For me, the north is too cool. I'm about Lisbon and the south, so it is a good. It's good to have both of us in here in the webinar, because we have different perspectives. But I think for those who want to live a different life and who would not want to live in a big city, I think you should try to take a look of other options. You can go to Lisbon or Porto, Cascais, the very well-known Algarve, the very well-known places. But I think there are other places. Alentejo is becoming increasingly popular. There are upcoming cities such as Tomar, and also Braga. I have some relatives in Tomar. It's a good place to raise a family, or Braga. I know that a filial from IBM made an arrangement with the university there, and they have their development center. So I think Portugal it's also in terms of economic perspectives is also interesting. And so I think there are lots of different places that people, I do love the region of Setúbal, and I think there are areas outside of Lisbon such as Arruda dos Vinhos, Mafra, which are super interesting, Azeitão, and I think there are many options. Perhaps if you are not looking for a big city, you can look outside the most searched places, and you have a place like Lausanne near Coimbra, super interesting places where you can have a super affordable life and a very good quality of life. I think what Portugal has to offer is a high quality of life, is a place where you can be happy, where you can raise a family, where you can benefit for good food and good climate. And on top of this, we are one of the safest countries in the world. We are extremely welcoming. We still have family and ethic values, which are important. As Andres mentioned, we have high proficiency in English, and a great healthcare, and still affordable. So I think, and still we have a great internet. Most of our clients say that internet is better than at home. Do you agree with that, Andres?
Yeah, I haven't frozen yet on this webinar, so I'm rocking. Yeah. There's there's a number of things that before we get to the Q&A, that we'll answer every question that's been proposed today. But buying real estate here, it is coupled with a lifestyle. You're buying much more than four walls and a roof. You're buying a way of life. So it's cliche, but it's the truth. Location. It's going to make all the difference on the value for the property that you're going to buy if you're planning to live here. You don't have to live here. You don't even have to be a resident to buy real estate. You can buy real estate in Portugal without even ever coming to Portugal. Absolutely, that's possible. But understanding the different areas and the different value that you can get is a very important step before you make that move, I think.
Although you both have already answered, I will ask for this short answer about why is Portugal so worth it for you, Andres? In a short sentence, what would you say?
Portugal for me is the most unpretentious, welcoming place I've ever lived. For that reason, I see a very beautiful future for this country that had a pretty rough go in the 20th century, and the adaptability of the people is at the core of their very being, having conquered half the world already, having been great traders and diplomats, having always been a small country that's been dependent on strong relationships. The Portuguese have been incredibly receptive to me and to every nationality that I've helped buy a home over here. When you're talking the business side of things, Portugal is definitely beginning its up and up situation as far as real estate goes. Prices, as I said, continue to go up and up and up over the last few years, but the prices really started to become fair around 2017, 2018. If you invested before that, woo, you made one heck of a deal. But there's just continued growth because there's so much development still to be done. Porto, where I am, in Lisbon, are UNESCO World Heritage areas that have very strict development rules for a lot of houses and buildings that you'll see that are abandoned and empty. And it's always something that catches people's attention. How can the country look like this still in the 21st century? There are a number of reasons for it, but there was a big exodus of money and people after the dictatorship ended here in 1974. So income and direct foreign investment is a major part of real estate growth in this country. Porto alone, 58% is direct foreign investment for real estate growth over here. So it says about what's to come. And I think it's fantastic that people are finding this country as I had. And I feel very lucky that I get to live here.
Thank you. And Sandra, why is our Portugal so worth it?
I think it's a quality of life. It's a place to be happy. It's a good place to raise a family. I just told, I don't know if I told, but we had a client that had diabetes type 1. She said that due to the reduced stress that she lives here, she reduced the insulin intake by half. We had another client, she's a teacher, and she looks much younger. She takes care of herself here in Portugal. She eats healthier because we have this Mediterranean diet with lots of olive oil and fresh fish and vegetables, and many times were not genetic modified. So I think we can live a happy life here. And on top of that, we have European rules. We are a civilized country, one of the oldest nations in the world. We still have a good education system, a good healthcare, and we are one of the safest countries in the world, I think, in that respect. But we are still a good place for new ventures. We are a good place for startups. We are a good place for new ideas, and we are extremely welcoming. We already had the Arabs here. We had contacts with Africa. We were one of the first, with India. So I think we are European. We have European rules, but we are very open to the world. And this is one of the most welcoming countries for foreigners.
Thank you very much for your perspective. Maybe we could go now for the Q&A session, unless you have something to add for what you have spoken before.
I have just a
Sandra?
final aspect from a legal point of view. Once
Okay,
you're legally resident here, you can start work from day one. You can own property without any restrictions. You can own your own business and do whatever activity you want. You will be treated as a national, except for a very strict, very exceptional things such as voting in some situations. So you will be treated like a national from a legal point of view. And after 5 years of living here, if you do speak the language and meet other criteria, you can also have access to the Portuguese citizenship and one of the best passports in the world, with requirements that are low and less demanding than the majority of nations in the world.
okay. Okay, so let's move to the Q&A part of our webinar. I hope until now we have covered a lot of what people do want to know. Now I will share with you some questions that require quick answers. Maybe we could start by this one, which is for Sandra, maybe. Can a husband and wife's income be combined for the digital nomad visa minimum requirements? This is one of the questions.
I don't think so. So the law is clear. The major applicant should be able to prove that he earns of average 4 Portuguese minimum salaries or wages, which is 3,040 euros. You can do the family reunification process. You can have a major applicant, and this major applicant, through the family reunification process, can bring the children, the wife, sometimes even the parents and parents-in-law. But you need the applicant, according to the law, you need one applicant to meet fully the financial criteria.
Okay, thank you. We have another one, which is, what are the Portuguese tax implications for people working remotely in Portugal, but for foreign companies? So for the digital nomad visas, I would say. What are the Portuguese tax implications? Are they similar to the ones that you have explained? Do they have something in specific?
I think this is a complicated question. This is not easy to answer. It depends on the type of professional relationship. You have a dependent, or if you are an independent worker. If you are an independent worker, for sure, you'll need to pay taxes in Portugal. If you are dependent, it depends. It's not clear. It's something that you have to analyze prior to initiating the process, because there's not a straightforward answer. What we have been seeing from a practical point of view is remote workers coming to Portugal and they pay taxes in the country of origin and they don't pay here in Portugal. But I think this situation is not completely legal. We will have to analyze each situation, because probably in the future, the Portuguese tax authorities will raise, because this will be considered work done in Portugal. I think this is the kind of situation that has to be analyzed prior to moving to Portugal, in order to know exactly what would be your tax and social security exposure. So this is the kind of thing where I think you need a specialist. You can contact us or any other specialist in this field, but this is the same kind of thing that you have to be analyzed prior to moving to another country. I think it's a fantastic adventure to move to another country, but you do need professional assistance in tough issues such as taxation, legal themes, or real estate, or any investment that you are doing.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. We have a couple asking these. If we retire there in Portugal, then eventually want to pass on the property to our children at the end of our lives, is that a consideration to prepare for as soon as one invests and lives there? Will they have to be residents once it is inherited to them, or can they just keep the property until they want to live there or sell?
I think it's best, if you buy a property, it's best to do a will. I think it simplifies things from a bureaucratic point of view, but if you don't do it, your children will still inherit your goods. Your children don't need to reside in Portugal, don't need to have civil residency to inheritance your property. So there are not major concerns. Your children, once you invest in Portugal, your children will for sure inheritance your goods, your properties, even if you don't do anything. But it's best to do a will. It may simplify things from a bureaucratic point of view. People don't need to reside here to own property here. Andreas already mentioned this. Portugal is quite open and simple about this.
Okay, we have another quick question, which is, in terms of taxes, does it depend on location and property construction year? Yes or no?
No, it doesn't. But there's a difference in real estate council taxes in respect to the location, but the difference is not much.
Minimal.
So yes.
Yes, Andres, you were saying?
No, it's minimal. There's no variation in that. No.
Okay. We have here, I am Canadian and I am interested in buying in Portugal, but not necessarily becoming a citizen or resident, but spending at least 6 months of the year there. What are the restrictions that would apply to this situation?
You can easily buy a property. You don't have to live here, not even a month. You can even don't visit. If you don't visit Portugal, you can buy property and keep it here. This is for sure. Once you spend 6 months in Portugal, you will have to start to think about tax issues, because one of the criteria, it's not the only one, and I would say it's not the main criteria to become tax resident, is living 6 months in Portugal. But I think I won't go into very complex details of taxation. But I think once you live 6 months here, it's time to address the tax issue.
Okay.
I think it's also important to point out, just to make a point, you know, if you're a North American or any country, a third country national that's not a European Union citizen, then you can only spend 90 days consecutively here. And then you have to leave for another 180 days. And then you can go for another 90 days. So to stay a full 6 months consecutively, you have to make a special request for that if that's your intention. So that's an important point to make, I think.
Yes, of course, because a touristic visa would allow you to stay 3 months. And for Americans, for people from the UK, they can come for 3 months without a visa. Many times the authorities, if they stay until now, if they stayed 4 months, wouldn't raise a problem. But more than that, you would need a visa to stay in Portugal longer than that.
Okay. Then we have another question. This one is regarding to the public health system, which says, regarding the access of public health system and restrictions, I have heard that foreigners above a certain age who become a resident cannot benefit from these. How accurate is this? Maybe I can answer.
That he is the right person.
I can answer that it's not accurate at all because there is no age limit for the national health system. So even the oldest of the oldest can subscribe to the national health system and have all the assistance and support they need for whatever they have. Okay, so this is the answer to this question.
I would say even more that even it's possible for older people, irrespective of the age, to access to private health insurance, which is not the norm in some other foreign countries such as the US.
Exactly. Also, another question, is family reunification extended to adult children, college students, or only dependent children? I would say that some college students are also dependent, but how do you want to explain?
I would say that they would be within the normal range of a college student if they are until 25 or 24. And if you show that the parents are paying the tuitions and are giving them money on a regular basis, they can be considered dependents. Because in Europe and in Portugal, it's normal that a person till 24, 25 is still dependent. So they may be considered. In other situations, they would have to have some disabilities more than that, so they could be considered dependent.
Okay. We have here, which I believe it is an important question for you both. Is the tax on real estate same for a Portuguese resident and a non-resident?
Yes. Yes. In terms of owning property, yes.
Okay, it's important to be clear, so I hope this has helped. Now, do you have to have passive income to qualify for a D7 visa, or does having a certain amount, like a lump sum of money in a retirement account, such as United States 400K, count if I am not withdrawing from this account?
I would say that D7, the requirement is passive income coming on a regular basis. I would admit that in some cases, there were persons that had successful applications without having regular income, regular passive income, but I would say this is not the norm. What is in the law and what is the normal criteria for public authorities is that you have to show that on average, you earn 760 euros per month, plus 50% for the spouse, if the spouse is not doing an independent application, plus 30% for each child. So the Portuguese do check if you have regular passive income coming on a regular basis. I would admit that there might be an exception, and there might be one authority that admitted that people just with savings could come under a D7. But I think this is not the norm. This is not what the law says. This is not the normal interpretation of the law.
Okay. And now the last but not the least, as people usually say, we have this one. Can you re-explain the rule about the number of days you have to reside in Portugal for the D7 visa? I think I saw 183 days in an answer, but I didn't quite understand how it works. For example, if I have a family emergency in the United States that takes me away from Portugal for 250 days during the year, how would that work?
Let me explain. So the D7 is a residency visa. You are expected to live in Portugal. So the first period of the visa is the 2-year period. In this 2-year, according to the law, you should not be absent in the country for more than 6 months in a row or 8 months totally. But the authorities, if you have professional reasons, if you have family reasons, and if you need to stay longer, to be absent for the country for more than this time, it has been considered acceptable. And people will only take a look at that after 2 years by the time of the renewals. From a practical point of view, what the Portuguese authorities have been checking is, does this person has a home in Portugal? Are they based in Portugal? So the authorities are not very strict in terms of stay, because if you have to leave for more time than what the law says, until now it has been accepted that if you have a family reasons, if you have professional reasons, it's important to prove after 2 years that your life is seated in Portugal, that you have a home in Portugal, that you're a tax resident in Portugal. But the Portuguese authorities have not been very strict in terms of times of residency by the time of the renewal. Was I clear enough?
For me, you were, so I believe. I believe you were. Yeah. Okay, guys. I don't know if you have any further to add to our chat here. From my part, it has been a pleasure to do this webinar with you. I think it was really useful for everyone. Everything else that has not been addressed yet, our office will definitely have the answers and the will to help everyone to be more clarified about everything. So this is my goodbye, and I expect your goodbyes now, the way you want.
So first of all, let me explain my joy of doing this with Andres. I have been working with a lot of people, and we do like to work with Andres. So we would vouch for him as a real estate agent in Portugal. I think he's a very good professional. So all those that are considering real estate investment, I think this man knows what to do and won't make you lose time. So I'm very happy about it. As a last note, I think about Portugal, I think it's important to say that this is a very democratic, non-judgmental country. So we abolished death penalty. We were one of the first to abolish death penalty, and still are one of the safest countries in the world with less criminality. We are a family and a traditional country, but we accepted gay marriages a long time ago. We were one of the first to do it. We are in general a very democratic country, and different ideas are well accepted. And I think from being a jurist and being a legal person, I think this is for me accepting different ideas, different opinions, being non-judgmental about this. I think this is a major aspect of the country. And I think this is a major point now for countries as the United States, because we are a country where different ideas are accepted, or people really have freedom of speech. And this would be I think this is a great country to live. And I think this would be my final word. A last disclaimer, I'm sure we didn't cover all the questions, but please contact us, that we will be more than willing to help you and assist you in whatever need you might have. Andres, last final
endings.
Well, I'm flattered. Thank you so much, and grateful. Working with Sandra and her team, I can also say has been exceptional, because it is such an important step to any real estate transaction in this country to have a competent legal team behind you. It is important to note that real estate here is a kind of a Wild West situation in most cases. We don't have a multiple listing system. Individual agents are not licensed. That's an important point that everybody should know. And it does require a very strong level of trust with a competent entity. So I'm very grateful to work with Sandra, and I recommend her as well. As far as real estate questions or anything is concerned, whether you're purchasing for a golden visa or not, I do extend my services to everybody here, and I hope that I can help make your dreams come true and getting real estate here in Portugal. whether you want to live here or not, I can definitely say it's a very good decision if you want to, but everything is possible. And I think Portugal is a place that is just beginning to be discovered.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye. I think we will end the seminar.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.